Welcome back. You're now watching the political segment on The Weekend Show. It's been over 178 days since the Academic Staff Union of Universities in Nigeria embarked on industrial action. So they've been on strike, and so students in tertiary institutions have been home for over 5 months now. According to the Minister of State for Labour, he stated that ASU is demanding for over 1.3 trillion, which is about a huge chunk of the national expenditure across all sectors. However, even here in the FCTs, schools, private and public, were advised to shut down as a result of security threats in the Federal Capital Territory. While we deal with that here in Nigeria, globally, Nigerians, even after being taught in English and after being colonized by the British, still have to write an English test to get admission into some universities outside the country. Our guest today has been actively fighting against the policy which makes Nigerian students, after studying in English, to still write English exams to go to school. Our guest is Ebenezer Wikina. He is the founder of Policy Shapers, an organization that leverages technology to mainstream youth in politics and in policy development in Nigeria. He has over 12 years of experience working with more than 30 organizations across multiple sectors. Ebenezer is also a World Economic Forum expert, senior category judge of the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition, founding member of the Open Government Youth Collective, and pioneer member of the British Council's UK Africa Youth Advisory. And it goes on and on and on. Ebenezer also has interviewed over 120 global leaders across 30 countries. It's a pleasure to have you.
Same here, Andy. Thank you so much for having me.
And I must commend you for doing amazing work, because I remember meeting you in 2014 when the Port Harcourt Global Shapers was starting, and you came over to meet with the Abuja Shapers. And so you've done tremendous work in the last 9 years, and I know you've been doing this for over 12 years, but I have personally seen you work in the last 9 years. Welcome to the Weekend Show.
Thank you so much. It's really good to see you again.
First thoughts, and I said I'll talk about ASU strike every week until they call it.
Yes, please. I mean, it's something that we need to talk about, really.
We do have to talk about it. I'm a student in Nigerian University doing a PhD, and I started in 2018. Lost 1 year due to COVID. Then there was strike, and now there's strike again. And Nigerians have gone from being sad to being worried to just being depleted about it. ASU and the NLC had, I think, a strike action, a protest on the 26th of July. And these conversations are still going on. I also know the president gave a 2-week deadline ultimatum for this to be done. It's past 2 weeks. What's your take on the state of education in Nigeria as it is?
Man, I feel education is the most important sector for any country that is serious, right? Human capital development is the most important resource, human resource, and if you're not able to find ways to mine that resource, I mean, we focus a lot on mining crude oil and gold and all the other natural resources, but human resources, the most important. If you're not able to find ways to educate your people and give them common values, all of the challenges we see around unity and, literacy and unemployment and, all of those issues will not go away, right? In 2020, my team at Policy Shapers and I, we took part in a policy hackathon at MIT. And, we did some research, part of our policy brief that we wrote. It was a brief that we wrote to advise the Federal Ministry of Education on how to keep the schools running during COVID. I mean, it really didn't turn out well. But part of the findings that we discovered from that work was that we saw that over the past 10 years, the past decade, we haven't invested in the education sector more than 8% of our budget every year. So the best we've done is 8.5%, and that was sometime in 2012 or 2011. Since then, we haven't done up to that. UNESCO recommends that a developing country should invest at least 16 to 20% of its budget to show seriousness and really to build its human capacity. Because it's your human capacity that then helps you to grow every other sector, right? But we haven't even done 10% in the past decade. So how would you grow if you're not investing in the system that churns out, the doctors, the people who run the various industries? How are you expected to grow above poverty or live above the vices or the challenges that we see in our society today? So I think it's I was really heartbroken just watching the interview with the Minister of State yesterday. I mean, it's one thing to say we can't take a loan to pay 1.2 trillion, 1.3 trillion. But are we doing something else? Like, is it like saying, should we need that and beg ASU? Let's beg them. Or no, I mean, we're in 2022. We really have gone past that stage where you just use sentiments, really. I think all stakeholders need to come to the table, right? There's been a long conversation about our education sector and how we need to look for a myriad of funding. I mean, it's happening in the US, it's happening in the UK. You don't just expect the government alone to fund, but even for what the government should be funding, they're not even doing that enough, right? So I think there's a need for a more sustainable way. I think what often happens is we try to fix the strike currently and hope for the future we go work well, right? As opposed to finding a more sustainable long-term solution to fixing that particular, because it's been 16 years of strikes. I mean, it's been going on and on and on and on. And, you know, we don't, sometimes it's hard to see the direct correlation between those strikes and our economy or our education sector. But it does have a huge, you know, I mean, you lose years, you lose time, people's interest. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine what it will be like when people go back to school. You might need another 1 month or 2 months to get back into that cycle of reading and trying to study and exam. So I actually think that we haven't really done well. This is one sector that we need to look at. Candidates who are trying to put themselves forward to the election. I mean, if you're not telling me about education, you're not even serious, really. You need to be telling me, and not just tell me I will build education. No, tell me the practical steps you would take to make education sector. How would you fix ASU strikes in a sustainable way that we'll never go back to a situation where we're having consistent strikes as we've had in the past? How would you fund, you know, basic education? How would you fund primary education? What other funding mechanism beyond the government would you incorporate? How would you get private sector involved in funding education? There's so many issues, you know, to look at, and I think we really need to take it really, really seriously.
So we'll come to private institutions funding education, because that's a conversation we must have.
Yes.
And I think it was quite unfortunate with the comments from the Minister of State, Festus Keyamo Sands, saying even if it means parents begging ASU to fix the situation, even if it means he as a minister kneeling down to beg ASU, but the reality is Nigeria churns out a great loads of specialists and doctors and lawyers who leave the shores of Nigeria and do great stuff. However, the demand is 1.3 trillion. Is this payment going to be broken into several years? Because the argument of the government is total expenditure for overhead is about 6 trillion. And one sector alone is asking for 1.3, which means what would be used for infrastructure, what would be used for healthcare and the likes. However, this is why we have a Ministry of Budget and Planning. This is why we have a Ministry of Finance, and this should be done. However, school fees in Nigeria is still relatively affordable in public institutions. And some people have stated that as a result of this, the schools cannot be self-sufficient. Do you think it's about time that general fees in Nigeria should be realistically reviewed to match the times and the economy?
I mean, I feel that would eventually happen, but if you raise the fees now, at the time when we're almost at an all-low poverty, you know, I mean, you just send everybody out of schools, right? I mean, I feel policy making should be responsive to the environment, and the current environment that, you know, our poverty level, our GDP, I mean, don't even talk about the exchange rate. There's still so much that's fighting against, you know, the money in Nigerians' pockets. So if really we want to get to that point, I think it would eventually come to that point, because, I mean, you can think of these guys like Harvard, and we've done programs at Harvard and co, you know how much, you know, they request. And you see how people often want to get there. I think beyond just raising the fees, you need to also raise the content, such that when people go to school, it's an investment. And they're sure that if I invest in the 4-year program, which will cost a certain amount, when I come out, I can get a job, you know, with that knowledge. You know, what I've learned in school is relevant in the workplace, and I'm able to go in and use that knowledge. So you need to raise the content, you need to make it more attractive, such that we're not even looking for just Nigerians. So even border countries like Cameroon and, you know, Niger and Benin can begin to send their students here. Because what's happening is that we're sending our own people out there, really. If our education sector is raised to the point where we have people even coming from outside the country to study here, that is foreign exchange. That is, you know, that is importation, that's exportation, right? That's exporting our skills. That's us getting, you know, extra revenue to education sector. So there's so much that we can do. But I think just raising the fees, you know, people talk about the fees, I think just raising the fees would not be policy responsive, because then the environment really cannot support that. And I think that, just like you said, that's why there's planning, that's why there's finance, there's budgeting. I think that with the current issues, beyond the regular talk of everyone being defensive on the table, I think we need to just come together and say, you know what, let us find a way to solve this problem. And it shouldn't be a problem that administration wants to solve for their time to pass so that the next guy is coming and want to suffer, but how do we solve it for a long-term thing? And I think that that's something even ASUU needs to, think about and go to the table with that kind of mindset, to meet the federal government.
So the private sector generates a lot of money. I was looking at Transcorp's half-year profits, running the billions, between 14 or 19 billion.
Yeah.
And not putting Transcorp on the spot, the same thing happens with telecoms.
Yes.
MTN, Glo,
banks,
Airtel are supporters.
Yeah.
They raise a lot of money, and so there are conversations about CSR. What can they do to contribute to the sector, and also investments.
Yes.
In some universities, the CBN, so like in Nasarawa State University, where I'm doing my PhD, our institute was built and donated by the CBN.
That's great.
What should private organizations and public organizations do to support the education sector? Because the truth of the matter is government can't afford to carry this burden on its own. What role should the private sector play in this?
I mean, I think you've said it. Private sector has a huge role to play in ensuring that sector, because somehow it connects to them, the workers, the people, the manpower that private sector needs will come from the education sector, right? It connects to every other sector. So I think that they need to first of all understand that they do have a responsibility to ensure that they're able to churn out, the kind of support that sector that will give you the people you need in the future. Because then what happens currently is that they get graduates into school, into their workplaces, and they do retraining for a couple of years to get them to the point where they can, work in their particular sector. So I think they do. I mean, you see, if you look at the UK and look at the US, you see organizations, donors, etc., supporting research programs. So they'll support a professor to get two PhD students to research on a particular issue that connects to their work, So all of those sort of things are ways that you can begin to bring in money into that sector to support them. So the professor doesn't have to go to the school to look for money to support his PhD. He can then just get it from donors and from organizations who are willing to, get their hand in the game, because really I think it's an all hands on deck sort of thing if we really want to make that possible.
Talking about education, some of us have been privileged to study both in Nigeria and outside Nigeria, and I see what you say about increasing the content, the value which people are getting, because to be honest, someone coming with a degree from Harvard and someone coming with a degree from Okoko Maiko, when
it's like really,
and you're a Harvard-trained journalist, but what caught my attention was that beyond the problems which we face here in Nigeria, I noticed on Twitter about a couple of years ago, you were saying something about IELTS. What was that about? Run us through that process.
Yes, please. Yeah. So, so as most people would know, we're colonized by the British, right? Most of our bureaucratic systems, civil service, our government systems were all set up in the English language. Even though Nigeria has national languages, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, and other, I mean, close to 500 languages in Nigeria. But English is the official language, so that's the language you use to write WAEC and the school living certificate and everything really. When you're being interviewed to be ministered in the House of Representatives or National Assembly, you speak in English, right? So English is like the language of upward mobility in Nigeria. But for a long time, some people even estimate that as long as 20 or 30 years, Nigerians have been made to write English proficiency tests whenever they seek to study abroad or go to work abroad or emigrate abroad. And many people have said that they just do it. I mean, everyone speaks against it, but it's mostly like an internal thing. They're like, oh, this rubbish English exam, and they just write it and just pass. But I think I had an encounter with an American university. And we took the conversation to Twitter in 2020, and the university was made to change their admissions policy such that anyone in the world who claims to speak English can take their first course at university. If you pass that course, you can then, it's an introductory course, so you can just really just go through the course, and if you pass that, you can move on and go on with your education. So it began to make us as think about it from a more systemic level. So we said, wait, hold on. The UK has this list that is called the Majority English Speaking Country List. On this list, There are about 11 countries from the Caribbean, so that's like Bahamas, Jamaica, Guyana and co. There are 2 or 3 countries from Europe, Ireland, the UK, and Malta. You have countries from Oceania, Australia, and New Zealand, but there's no country from Africa. And we started to think, why? Like, really, let's even say we leave Europe and Oceania. The Caribbeans, anytime you put the Caribbean side by side with Africans, there's a huge similarity, really. The way they speak, the Creole languages that we have on both continents, the fact that it's mostly descendants from Africa that went to even found most of the Caribbean countries. And we started to think, what if we begin to ask questions about this particular issue? Why are we just allowing it go on? So long story short, there was a long advocacy plan and all the engagement, but long story short, we're able to engage the UK Home Office, and we asked them questions about the majority English-speaking country list, and we thought, this is a list that's on your site. Why are there no Nigerian countries there? Why are there no African countries there? Why is Nigeria not there? These countries are also proficient in English language. There's data from sources like the annual English Proficiency Index that is released by a Swedish company called Education First. African countries are always topping that index. And it took a while for them to respond. We got into a partnership with Change.org Nigeria. We did some collaborations. Of course, we got campaigners, close to 80 campaigners who came on board, in our advocacy task force as policy shapers. And just the social pressure. Sometime in January, they responded and said their criteria is that for a country to be on that list, at least 51% of their population should speak English. And we thought 51% is very modest. Like, come on. We're very sure that we can get at least that in Nigeria. And so I'm sure when they thought they responded, everything would have just died. But we went to work at policy shapers with our various teams. And we did some research and got data from the United Nations, population data from the World Bank, etc., got data from the West African Examination Council, just showing over the past 5 years, you've had close to 5 million English credits in our WAEC exams, just showing the trajectory and the rise in proficiency across the various ages. And the fact that about 62% of Nigeria's population is under 25 years. And these are people in the Gen Z, Gen Alpha. Those people are English people, really, right? And if your criteria alone is for 51%, you already have 62% alone without even doing any math. That's young people, tech-savvy people who are in that generation where English had been their native language, really. Most of them don't even know how to speak their indigenous languages. So we sent that to them. There was, of course, a lot of delay. We kept pressuring on social media to say, you have to respond to us. They responded, I think, in March of 2022, and then they said, we've seen your policy brief, it makes sense and everything, but we still can't add you to the list. And we said, why? Then they responded saying, our criteria is for more than 51% of the population to speak English. And we said, hold on. In this email, you said at least 51%. Now you're saying more than 51%. So we then give them more data that showed that more than 51% of the population spoke English. Our number is somewhere close to 62 point something percent. And we said, okay, this is more than 51%. So what is your complaint now? So since April 30, when we responded to the Home Office, they received it because we've gotten confirmations, but they haven't replied to us.
So talking about that, I'm also aware that the Canadian government, this has been put forward, yes, and there's about 150-page report, yes, which I read, yes. About this. And yes, so this is now a conversation which is being debated worldwide. Yes. And so the Canadian government is looking into it. Exactly. They have that policy document, exactly, which is reviewing it. But let's talk about standards. I run a business. Yes. I want to be able to recruit people, yes, at and to a certain level or standard which is acceptable for what I do and how I want to see my business going. For some of these countries, they claim it's an issue of standards. Let's be honest, when you come to Nigeria, we have a situation where the cutoff mark for JAMB in most places now is 140 out of 400. You have a situation where for common entrance levels, you had people who the cutoff mark had to be 2 points, yeah, or 10 points out of a possible 100. I
personally think that's hilarious.
And so we cause some of these problems for ourselves. Yeah. And so don't you feel that it's their way of having quality assessment and assurance to ensure that people coming into the system can actually cope?
True. And so we've asked them, okay, if you guys don't even think our data is good enough, since the evidence they require is public evidence, they call it public evidence, what kind of public evidence do you have on Jamaica, on Malta, on these countries who we also know, for example, in Malta, close to 78% of the population speaks Maltese, which is their native language. And in Jamaica, Patois, I mean, really about 2.9 million people speak Patois, and that's the way they communicate. So we're saying, if you say our data is not credible, okay, show us what you have on those other countries, and let's see if we can model it. And let's see if we even have it. And if we don't have it, it's fine. Really, we can say, okay, great. We tried and it didn't work. But again, don't forget that there's Ghana, there's there's South Africa, there's Kenya. So there are other countries. Even if you say Nigeria is not up to the level, what about Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Kenya? Malawi. All of these countries that are also there are not also on the majority.
Also, those
English
countries are
also
not
have to write. Yes, they also have to
Okay.
write English proficiency tests. So there's none of the colonies from Africa that are on that particular list.
regardless of the fact that we're colonized by
Regardless of the fact that we're
British.
colonized by the British, regardless of the fact that we have ties, we're in the Commonwealth. I mean, the Commonwealth heads of government meeting held in Rwanda this year. So regardless of the fact that we're in the Commonwealth and all of these particular issues, we're not there. So because you're not showing us that data, we are suspecting you. Do you understand? We actually feel that it's beyond just the fact of you not believing that our data is not credible. We think that there's something else, because if really you have public evidence, because they call it public evidence, if you have evidence on these other countries, you easily just say, okay, go to this site, read it all, and then see the ones that we have. But they're not sharing that. And that's why we then think that there's some bit of prejudice around it. And people have spoken a lot about neo-colonialism, and all the things about, discrimination and racial discrimination. And we think that there's some undertones of it here. Because you even have people who had studied in the UK.
Yeah.
Say they studied in the UK for their bachelor's program, and then after 2 or 3 years, and they want to do a master's program in another country, and they ask them to write the English proficiency test, right? Or they do it in another European country, and then come to the UK, they will still ask them to write the English proficiency test. So for them, the question we always ask is, what's that 2-year thing? Why does it have to expire after 2
Do
years?
you lose your memory?
Well, yeah, I mean, really,
Yes.
what's about the 2 years? Because we've asked, is there a linguistic backing? Is there some theory from Noam Chomsky or something to defend it, really? And they really haven't responded. So we have so many questions that are not having answers, and that's why we continue to push, because we believe that there's so many issues around it.
So I noted that you said your last communication with the British government, I think, was in April,
Yes.
and there's no information
Yes.
until now.
Yes.
But the Commonwealth is quite a large body, and they have over 300 tertiary institutions.
Yes. Close to 500, actually.
Things. So tell us about that and how reform IELTS
Yes.
policy shaping
Yes.
would
So-
affect that, especially
Yes.
with the Commonwealth.
Yes, so because we've not been able to get that huge win, which we continue to push, and a good thing to mention is that we already have this issue on the Vice President's table. And just yesterday, we also engaged the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so we're actually having some underground work going within government to see if we can have a government-to-government diplomatic
How has that been so
engagement. Well, so far, so good. I can say that at least we're seeing progress. We're seeing interests, which really has impressed me, because I mean, as a Nigerian, you feel like government doesn't care about you, but we're actually seeing some kind of interest in the issue, and we're hopeful that we're able to push something through. But we've also started to record wins, so we're working with a network of Nigerian lecturers in various universities and students. So we're empowering them to begin to engage their own institutions, so that they can see how they can drive change on these issues. Because I mean, their own institutions know them and know their capabilities. So if I am the Nigerian ambassador in this particular institution, and you can see how I'm performing, you should be able to believe that that's how my people are. And so we're seeing wins in Canada. There are universities in Canada, Athabasca, University of Alberta in the US, University of Oregon, Clemson University, University of Texas at Austin. So we're beginning to see changes in these various places. And we have people who are engaging authorities in Australia, in the UK, in Europe. But we've recently just engaged the Association of Commonwealth Universities that has close to 500 members. And our argument is simple, really. we are in the Commonwealth. Even if you don't want to use data, we are in the Commonwealth, right? And in view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what is the rationale for asking a fellow Commonwealth country or former Commonwealth citizen to write an English exam that costs almost twice their minimum wage to get admission into your own school? Really, what's the rationale? And that engagement is going smoothly. We're hopeful that before the end of this month we should get some bit of feedback, and we're hoping that institution can then engage the 500 members and say, okay, this is the issue, and we think that you can do something about it, and we encourage you, to bring formal reform to your policy. It's not all the universities in their group that request for IELTS, yes, but most of them do. And we're hoping that they can do that spread and it to come down. hopefully all of this begins to gather the storm because we actually do think that the biggest win will be for the UK itself, because the UK owns the English language, right? There's no other country in the world, and most countries even from Asia. So you have universities in Saudi Arabia asking us to write English proficiency tests. They speak Arabic, right? But they're asking us because they're taking the leave from the UK. The UK doesn't recognize us, so they feel that if they don't recognize us, they're taking that inference from the majority English-speaking country list, and they're requesting for us. So we believe if we can win in the UK, something we can easily cascade to other countries, and we don't think anybody else really will be able to stand against us when we get that win, from the UK.
I think it's, and I know it's commendable what you're doing and ensuring that policy changes. That's a huge form of activism. I know you've won an MTV award, Sound City MVP award for activism. You've been nominated for the Future Awards. Yeah. And it's weird because this is the role of the Ministry of Education. Shouldn't this be a battle which is being led by the Ministry of Education to ensure that our degrees, our English language is acceptable with our foreign partners? So the Ministry of Education vis-a-vis the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah, I
mean, naturally that's what should happen, but we know that there's so many things that should be happening in Nigeria that are not happening. And at Policy Shapers, our mantra is, do we wait and say we are the future of Nigeria till the future before we start acting? Or do we even test the hypothesis that even as 20-something-year-olds, as early 30-year-olds, we can actually begin to engage governments locally, internationally, on issues that we care about and bring change, right? And that has been our mantra, and I think Reform IELTS is one of the ways we're beginning to show that. We're also planning the Nigeria Policy Hackathon. I mean, in view of the forthcoming elections, the conversation online now is very, very brutal, right? There's a lot of my guy, your guy. People are often taking sides. And we think that for 2023 to be meaningful, it needs to be an issue-based election. It should really be about the issues, the challenges that we have in this country, and who can solve them. Not really where it's from, what it's doing. No, who can solve these problems that we have, because these are existential challenges. And so next week, between Friday and Sunday, next week we'll be having the Nigeria Policy Hackathon. We're bringing young people together, close to 300 of them. We're expecting that we'll see young people from Kano, working with young people from Imo State, really, from Lagos, coming together to find ways to say, okay, if I was the policymaker, and this is the education challenge, this is the ASU strike challenge, what would I do about it, right? And we're having mentors, Global Shapers and co coming to speak to them during that period. And we're hoping that they can, because once you get young people who are about 77% of the voting population, hopefully most of them will go and take their cards, right? If we're able to get them to begin to think solutions, because the idea is solutions. I feel if you can get them to say, if I can think of a solution, what about these candidates, really? And I think that way we can begin to move the conversation from just being sentimental to being about the issues. And if you can really get the thing to be about the issues, the education issues, the healthcare issues, the unemployment issues, and ask strong questions like, what is your idea? What is your solution? And when we begin to ask candidates, I think candidates will sit up. Happily, we are seeing a situation where people are not going to fry gari and carry akara, and hopefully, hopefully, when we get to that point, people will begin to make our democracy will begin to improve, and people will begin to engage from a point of being aware and being informed. And so the work that people like Budget and Yaga are doing, really, really amazing, because it's bringing that consciousness to the fact that I can actually ask questions, I can actually begin to engage. And because these issues concern me, it's not just like yesterday at an event I gave, just finally before I stop talking, yesterday at an event I gave an example of how people don't know that the banditry in the north affects the south. People often are disconnected from it, but we're trying to help them understand that, see, the reason why the cost of fruits is going high in the south is because trailers are not able to drive down anymore, with the fruits. And the ones that try to manage to go down, when they come to the south, whether it's Delta or Rivers or wherever, the price will naturally go up because, increased demand, low supply, True. Right? And naturally the price will go high. So those sort of issues, trying to contextualize it for them and make them know that these issues are not just far from you, they're things that can connect to you, and you should all be invested in it, because I think that we can really change 2023 if we can get people to come out to vote. And to get them to come out to vote, they need to see that it's about the issues, and it's about the people that can solve the problem for them. And once you get them passionate to the point where they can come out to vote, I feel we can change this country.
talking about education is extremely important, especially as we enter the 2023 elections.
Yeah.
Out of the 12 million people who just registered to
Yeah.
vote, 71% of them are between the ages of 18 to 34
yeah.
to 35,
Yeah.
and so the other bulk of it are people between 35 to 49. And these are some of the important questions to ask, which is why I think this hackathon which you're doing is a great idea. But reeling it back in to Nigeria, over the last 5 years, we've seen